booth, walked away with nothing new. Scanned 100 business cards, but no meetings coming through. They focused on the flashy lights, forgot about the plan. Now they're wondering what went wrong, wish they'd understand. It's not about the booth design, it's not about the swag you hand out. It's a system that you build. Don't wing it, build this.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Seriously Don't Do That podcast. This week, if you haven't guessed already, we're going to talk about seriously don't wing it at trade shows. And today, I'm delighted to have my son, Ben, joining us from Grow Digital. Ben and I have been business partners for about 5 years, maybe 6 years, Ben. In our marketing agency, he certainly helps me out a lot with Greater Gain as well. And I wanted to have him come in because recently we used kind of our own formula in a trade show and had a lot of success with it. And while we were there, we were talking about our audience and saying, gosh, we really ought to be talking to them about this. And stay tuned because we're going to have actually an offering that we're going to have from Greater Gain and Grow Digital that will help you with trade shows. And again, releasing this in December because most of you are probably doing some planning for next year's trade shows, if not already locked in for some of those. So we want to talk about today what you can do to be successful with the trade show. So I want to start out with really, Ben, I had said we were going to talk a little bit about a client use case, but I think we probably ought to talk about our use case in a recent trade show we did in Las Vegas in the health tech industry. Maybe just to start, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the preparation that we did for that show, and maybe even a little bit about who our audience was with the show?
Yeah, super happy to start there. Thanks for having me on. And like you said, it's a very relevant time to be talking about trade shows because we're at the end of kind of the fall trade show season. And now we're starting to talk about the spring trade shows season, even though we have not even started the holiday season, it's already becoming relevant. So, yeah, we went to a trade show recently, and a lot of the stuff that we do is on the digital side of things. So for ourselves, trade shows haven't always been as relevant for us as it has been for clients. But we went into this trade show with pretty ambitious goals of what we wanted to leave the show with. And that started 2 months before the trade show even started. You got to get super intentional about, hey, what are your goals? There's a formula that we like to use when we're trying to measure the ROI, and it's really your meetings booked times your conversion rate times your customer value. And that's how you're going to be able to measure, hey, what is your actual return on investment on the trade show? And it starts, like I said, 2 months out, being intentional, figuring out who's going to be there, starting conversations with them, and trying to sell a meeting at the show just to get started.
Yeah, and I think something else to think about. You'd mentioned about our experience, and we do everything that we use in Greater Gain and Grow Digital. We use internally before we release that to our customers, primarily because if it screws up, we want to understand why that screwed up, and we're not going to experiment with our customers. So we did the same thing with the trade show, even though we've been doing it for a number of years. And I think one thing, even just before all of the stuff that we just talked about, that occurred to me was you need to make sure that your ideal customer profile is going to be at that show. And I think we did that. This was a show that has a lot of I'd say mature startups, founders that have gone through either a seed or a Series A round and are now starting to expand, kind of a large focus on people coming to the U.S. market from elsewhere. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you figure out whether your ICP is at a trade show?
Well, it starts with conversations. If you have a current customer base with them, hear what your current customer base, where they're going, because likely there's going to be more of them at trade shows. And I think that's kind of how we started with this trade show we've been referencing, is that we've had conversation. We heard, hey, it was, I don't know what you'd say, Dan, a third, half of our customer base had either been to the show or was still going to the show year over year. And that was a real signal to us of, hey, this is a show we need to be at to go and find more people that fit our ideal client profile. I mean, I think the other thing is just typical research. Go on, most of these shows have a very pretty website they put together with basic lists of who the attendees are going to be, who the vendors are going to be. You get an idea there. There's some other things that you can do that are a little bit more take probably a little bit more time to look through. If the show is trending on social media, you can always go through, see who's using the hashtags, run an analysis on that end, just to see if they fit your ideal client profile. Get lists from there, do some automated lead scoring, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later. But like Dan said, that intentionality has to start. Even don't pick the trade show and try to find the ideal client profiles. Find the ideal clients and then pick the trade show.
I think it's a really good point. And I think, one other way I would suggest, having, booked trade shows for our clients is asking the trade show promoter who attends their show, or most of them have, I'd say, a sanitized list that has the titles and the companies they're from. Again, do that research. I mean, I talked with actually, this was a potential client. It's probably been 6 months ago now. And their trade show budget for the US market was $500,000 for the year. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. And I asked him, I said, well, what was your return on that last year? And they didn't get a single deal out of it. And so I said, that you really need to do kind of all the things that we're going to talk about today as you think about those shows, because that can get expensive quick. And I would also say, just as an aside, the cost of the booth is really, that's probably half of it, but there's travel, there's time out of the field, there's, meals, there's all the collateral. I mean, everything, the booth design, there's a lot of other things that go into that. But I think the one thing we would say is, to kind of wrap up this part of it, talking about preparation, is preparation beats booth design every single time. And I think that's important. So let's get in a little more granular. Actually, you know what? One other thing I want to mention is, and I think you referenced it a little bit, Ben, but I want to be very deliberate in saying it. If you sign up for a booth at a trade show and you're going to rely on walk-by traffic, that is not going to work. By the way, the European model is very different. I think there is a lot more walk-up traffic, but most of the time when you're doing a U.S. trade show, you have to schedule your meetings, and you're not going to rely on people just wandering by. And I would go even one step further, is the people that are wandering by are probably not your ideal customer, or you're taking a big risk that they aren't your ideal customer. I think we were in a larger booth as part of this trade show, but if we had to rely on walk-up traffic, we would have starved, because we did not get any that were people that just kind of wandered by. So
yeah, and continuing on that point, because I think it's a really important point that you make. We've talked about the preparation. You need to be preparing way out in advance. That's kind of where you win or lose. And a lot of people think preparation is all about your booth design, what you're going to hand out at the show. And that's really not the case. I mean, your booth at the end of the day, it's just like any other sort of billboard brand awareness type activity. It's not a lead gen activity. The design of your booth can be a multiplier of your results, but it's not going to drive results at the end of the day. 100 times 0 is still 0. You got to have those meetings. That should be your foundational goal, not just, we've got to make sure our messaging is down and perfect on this booth. Our color scheme's perfect. Pretty booth doesn't drive meetings. People drive meetings. And just real quick, I'd say on the booth design, a couple things that were noticed. It definitely shouldn't be totally overlooked, shouldn't be your main goal, but I think, Dan, you would agree there's some overused verbiage and color schemes in booths these days. When friendly chat GPT is relied on too much, you go, I would challenge anybody. Go to a trade show and see how many booths their main thing is about something they're transforming or revolutionizing. You got to stand out. You got to be able to interrupt patterns there and go. I think going off color scheme shouldn't be overlooked either. There's a lot of blues out there. Feel creative to go out of the way there and stand out when it comes to the booth design phase.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to remember, I think the one frustrating thing I have, because we'll go out and walk a floor, and I've done that just recently in 5 trade shows. It's you want to have you don't have to have your full elevator pitch on the booth, but you need to be very clear about what you do for your customer. I think that's the other frustrating thing. And people put, we call it buzzword bingo. They got to have AI. They have to have something about transformation, something about revolution. And people don't care about that. They really want to know what's in it for them. So putting that very clearly on your booth, along with your name, is very helpful, because that does attract people's eyes. And I'm not saying you'll get no walk-up traffic, but you do want something that's going to catch people's eye and have them ask a question as well, with that design. So I think that the final thing I would say is don't make it too busy. So many people put, you want to keep very, very minimal words on there. A lot of people put a lot of text on there, and just nobody takes the time to read it. Ben, I wanted to maybe riff a little bit on one of the other things you mentioned, which is, focusing on what you hand out at the show. Creative trade show tchotchkes are awesome, but honestly, they never sold anything for anybody. And I'm sure we're going to have plenty of people that are going to want to argue with me about this, which is fine. I'm glad to have an argument. But most of our clients don't give away. If they give away anything at the show, they'll have a bowl of candy there. Those things never work. Now, if it's more of a B2C goal where you want to get your name everywhere, I can see handing those things out. But honestly, I'll give you a great example. There were people that had lots of traffic in their booth, but really no substantive meetings at the show that we went to. I mean, they probably had hundreds of people that came by, but it's just to pick up whatever cute little trade show tchotchke they have, whether it's a hat or a T-shirt or whatever. But
I would go one step further, because I think it all kind of ties in together, in that a lot of times having something in the booth that you're giving out, people are using as a crutch because they haven't done the preparation to actually schedule meetings in the first place.
Right.
And that's the key point.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. I think if you go in with the philosophy of we're going to attract people to our booth, that is the wrong philosophy. You need to go in with we are going to schedule meetings with these people, and that's what our focus is. Because ultimately, for most of our audience, unless you're the low end B2B SaaS type product, you really need to close 1 or 2 deals closed out of a show is going to pay for that show. And if you get 3 to 5, that's great. So let's get a little more focused on kind of before, during, after. I always tell our clients, Ben, you want to sell a meeting before the show, you want to sell a follow-up at the show, and you want to sell your product after the show. So maybe comment on that a little bit and talk a little bit about how you can execute that.
Yeah, I mean, it fundamentally comes down to a trade show is not the place to sell. You're creating the conditions for selling. When you're messaging them before the show, hopefully you've done the qualification to make sure that you're messaging the right people that are going to be at the show. So that kind of first step of qualification has been done. But like you said, you're selling a meeting. You're not giving them a product catalog of features and benefits that you do. You're simply, their time is valuable, your time is valuable. You're selling them a 15, 20-minute meeting within the show. Once you're at the show, it's important to realize that you're still not selling your product or service. You are building rapport and you're trying to figure out pain budget timeline. Does it fit with my ideal client profile? And you're trying to decide or determine, is it worth continuing this conversation outside of the show? You have very limited time at this show and you have a lot of opportunity at the show. So you want to make sure you're not spending, as it is with a lot of enterprise software, your sales cycle's a long. Months, could be years. Don't try and go through that in a 2-hour meeting at a show. Just have a 15-minute conversation, sell the meeting outside of the show. And ideally, have the meeting set before they leave the booth. Because, if it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday show, they're traveling Thursday, Friday's a catch-up day, they're in the weekend. If you're trying to reach out the next Monday when everything starts new again, it probably lost them already. You need to be able to schedule that meeting when they're in the booth and then worry about selling the product or service in that, we'll call it not necessarily an intro meeting, but that first meeting outside of the show once you've started to build that rapport and you understand them as a lead, as a prospect, what's their pain budget and timeline.
I think that's really good advice, Ben. And the one thing I want to stress is if you follow that kind of that procedure, you're going to have a significant amount of success. I hear from a lot of founders, I'd say broadly, but I think probably more from folks that are coming to the U.S. market. I hear, I had a great conversation at the trade show, but I never heard anything again. Well, that's because you didn't set the follow-up right then. I mean, people get busy and you bounce off their radar. Or if you wait till 3 weeks afterwards to follow up with them, you're not going to hear from them, especially when you're up against, I think both in, I'll say the spring and the fall season, especially if you're calling on the U.S. market, in the spring, by the time people get to May, they're headed out on vacation, right? So, and typically a lot of those they're kind of in an elbow season with U.S. holidays. And then in the fall, you're up against Thanksgiving. I mean, as we're recording this show before Thanksgiving, but most of the time in the U.S. market, once you get beyond Thanksgiving, it's pretty hard to engage people. That's why I never like going to trade shows that were in the U.S. in early December, because to get anybody focused back in afterwards was very difficult. Let's talk a little bit more, maybe get a little more in depth on connecting with the people prior to the show. I know we utilize LinkedIn for that, and we've got kind of our own system built. You want to talk a little bit about how we do that and maybe about the importance of lead capture and scoring?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say first and foremost, once you've found your trade show, or maybe while you're still looking for a trade show, any trade shows that have those networking apps you can be on prior to the show is a huge value add. Reason for that is if they don't have that and they don't have, Dan, did you have something to?
Well, I was just going to say, if they don't have that, I would question whether that's a good show for you to go to, because if there are no, again, I've done this over the years. There are some trade shows I've been to where you're literally at a table in a hall where people go between sessions. That's the worst. You don't want to go to a show like that. So I would say if they don't have a way to network at the show or as part of the app, I would question whether it's a great show for you, because you're going to have to do a lot of work outside of that to get people engaged. Yeah,
exactly. It is still possible, of course, but it does take some significant work. There's always going to be list salesmen out there that are going to try and sell you a list. I'll tell you, having bought lists from probably 24 different shows at this point, or having dealt with lists that have been bought by clients from 24 shows. I'll tell you, most of the time you got 50% of those are going to be valid emails, and probably 10% of those are going to be your ideal client profile, as long as it's broad enough. But
let's talk a little bit about that, because I do
Yeah.
think people get a lot of solicitations and they end up spending a lot of money. I would say, unfortunately, with our clients, Ben, they've had 1, 2, 3 bad experiences before dealing with this. So if at the very least we can keep you from having a bad experience, even if you don't decide to work with us, I think it's important. So those lists, I would say, most of the time are garbage. What they are is people have probably taken a spreadsheet with a title and with a company. They've tried to match it with a name, and then tried to match it with an email. But we've tried that before. I would tell you, I wouldn't waste your time on it unless you could get something for really, really cheap. I'm talking like $100, right?
Because that's the other issue you run into, is those lists just can be insanely expensive.
Right. Yeah. There are people out there that are selling $5,000, $10,000, and they talk about how effective they are. But normally, so I'll get into talking a little bit about kind of what our procedure is. But if we can get a list of titles and companies prior to the show, then we can really utilize some of the things that we do in LinkedIn to make those initial connections. And Ben, maybe you can talk about how we go through that, a little bit about how we can score those leads even before the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So it always matters kind of where's your starting point, where's your list of attendees. We'll play out the scenario as we're starting with an app. So we're at a trade show with an app. We're able to filter out, identify, our ICPs within the app, go out. Typically, you're able to connect with them within the app. Do not leave the interaction on the app. You don't want to be dependent on the conference platform for your conversation. A lot of times they will added contact information. You should be able to go and connect with them on LinkedIn. Should be able to shoot them an email, any of the above. Part of this is going to be dependent on your ICP, what channels they respond to the most positively. LinkedIn is a good one for most in B2B. So you're sending your connection and make sure it's personalized. Don't just send mass messages. You're sending your connection both on the app, and we found a ton of success going out, finding their LinkedIn, and starting connecting with them on LinkedIn prior to the show. It can be a short message. Hey, connected with you on the Money 2020 app. Saw you're going to be there this year. Would love to connect. Having a conversation started there and being able to do it at scale, which means it kind of all boils down to intentionality of you're going to have to put aside time prior to the show to go out and do this, what we'll call broadly prospecting, pre-show prospecting. The way I typically do it is I'll just leave an hour at the end of my day every day for the 4 weeks leading up to the show for prospecting, and just go out and start those and try and start those conversations. Lead scoring can be a huge friend of yours as well. And we have our way of automated lead scoring. You'll match your lead lists up to the ICP and figure out, hey, who are the top people to be going out and connecting with, so that you're intentional again with your strategy there. You're not just going out and trying to connect with everybody. You're trying to connect with people who genuinely match up with your ICP. And it sounds like we have a guest speaker, possibly, Dan.
Yes, I think that's my cat that's in the background that is yelling very loud. So I'm surprised. I didn't think it was loud enough for the mic to pick it up, but it did. So yes, that is Mochi the cat. And whenever anybody is out of the house, like I'm the only one here right now, she gets lost in the house and gets very upset. But I think Samson, the golden retriever, went to go comfort her, so she maybe will be quiet. I think so. Back to engaging with people. I get so many messages in these apps that they show up and throw up. They tell me everything that they do, and it's all about what they do. And honestly, I don't care about that. The people that are in the app and they're in LinkedIn, they want to know what's in it for them. So you really want to get very quickly to how you can help them and how you can help them, and that you understand their problem and challenge. And I think that's important when you think about your messaging. And Ben, I know you talked a little bit about connecting via LinkedIn. We use some technology that you hyper personalize the interactions with people. And so again, we would say at scale, if you're going to do this yourself, you definitely need to spend I would say on par with 40 to 50 hours prior to the show to make it a successful show. And that's certainly an investment of your time and effort. Ben, let's talk a little bit. I'm just trying to think of all the things that we talked through. We talked a little bit about people that are going to the show with a booth. Let's talk about how you can be successful at a show without a booth, because we do a lot of that with our clients. And we do it ourselves. Like, for instance, we'll be attending the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. Well, we've not been invited to the conference, but we will use that as a way to connect with our target market. Let's talk about how, as an attendee, you can do this.
Yeah, well, not a lot changes. Maybe just the meeting location changes. Right. Sometimes you could be, and I'd say oftentimes you can be more successful without a booth, because then you don't really rely on it as much, and you're more intentional beforehand to get the meetings booked. I mean, if you don't have at least 5 meetings booked every day before you touch down on where you're getting to, you're not attending for the show, you're attending for the scenery.
Right.
You got to have those meetings booked. Basically, any of these larger scale shows will have areas that you can meet with if you're booking a prior meeting. The one-on-one meeting areas, but then also maybe your ICP has a booth. There's no reason you shouldn't go up to them and start conversations with them, even if it's not scheduled. Now, nobody likes the traditional, snake oil salesman that'll go up to every booth and act like they're a potential customer and go on a 30-minute rant on how they should be a client of yours. But you can do that respectfully. You can say, hey, listen, I know you're here to find clients, but I think we have something that would have a value to you. When's a good time to connect? So I've done that at shows before, and sometimes earlier in the morning or later in the evening, or even the day before a show starts. You can have those kind of meetings. I've had those meetings before, when attending shows. I think something else that we should mention is, when you're making those connections and you're scheduling those meetings, some people make it very difficult, number one, or number two, they make it very vague. So, Ben, I know we like to use technologies that allows the prospect to schedule the meeting and pick a location to schedule the meeting. And then we have some reminders and things to help get them to that meeting. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. We don't have to get into that. There's a lot of technologies that do that, but maybe just some things that if somebody's going to do this themselves, how they remove the friction from getting people to that meeting. Yeah. Again, it's going to change from trade show to trade show. Sometimes you're able to book meetings within an app. That's great, because then most of the time the app will send automated reminders to the people just to let them know. If you need to use a Calendly link can work. Use something so that it's going to automatically be put on their calendar and your calendar, because it's very easy to forget, especially with the hustle and bustle of a trade show. There's a billion different things going on. You want them to be able to remember that's going to happen. Now, if you have to take a totally manual approach to it, it's still very doable. You can still send them a calendar invite. I would say regardless, they need a reminder the day before and the day of to make sure, because you can do all the work for a meeting and then have somebody totally forget about it, and then it's worthless. You can go to a show with 50 meetings booked and have a 10% show up rate, and it's still worthless. You got to help them follow through on it, and don't see it. If they've signed up for a meeting, you're not bothering them at that point. You're just reminding them. Right. Don't let the self-awareness creep in and think that you're a thorn in their side. They've signed up for them. You've showed them value, but show up to that meeting prepared to have a conversation. Do some background on them. Have some notes. Have just a couple of bullet points. Pull out at least one interesting kind of pattern interrupt thing. Maybe it's where they went to school. Maybe it's a hobby they have. Just something that's going to make you memorable. Because at the end of the day, one thing we say is better isn't always better, but different is better. So come up and make them remember you.
Yeah. So Ben, a lot to unpack there. I think, getting their contact information is great beforehand. You can text them because a lot of people won't have that app on, but if you're reminding them via text, that's great. Certainly some ways you can automate that. That I would say also, we'll talk about follow up here in just a minute, but we've had a lot of meetings with people that were supposed to meet with us at a show. For some reason got delayed, maybe didn't make it there. But we have great meetings after the show anyway, because we do the follow up and say, hey, sorry, we missed you. We'd like to remind them kind of why we scheduled a meeting. I would also say this is a great, when you're prepping for these meetings, this is a great use for AI. And really whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or Gemini. I mean, you can use that to synthesize the information you need in a meeting. And then I would say create on your calendar a second event that has all that in there. So as you're at the show, you can pop up your calendar and you can go, okay, I'm going to meet with Ben from Grow Digital. This tells me everything about him, tells me some unique things, and reminds me on what I want to talk to him about. That's great, because again, you want to come to those meetings prepared, because number one, if you come to those meetings prepared, you are going to stand out from everybody else, because most people are not prepared with those meetings, and our clients appreciate that, especially people that are busy, that are trying to run them back and forth between sessions. So Ben, let's talk just a minute about follow-up and kind of how we would do that. And I would say, realizing that we should have set the meeting at the follow-up meeting at the show, but we also interact with a lot of other people. You may scan their badges, you may meet them at a networking event, you may have business cards. Maybe what I should do is kind of talk a little bit about kind of what I do for shows, and maybe you can talk about some of the programmatic stuff. But like, I always capture all those business cards, and I have all my scans, and I have all my follow-up set up. This is old school because I'm old. I have that done before my plane touches down on the way home. That I've already started doing that. And of course, that's important to get all that in. But Ben, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how people can do some of that programmatic follow-up. I'm going to say, let's exclude the people you already have those meetings with, because I'm assuming that you're going to verify those meetings and set those up. But what about all the other people you touch at the show?
Yeah, so we're talking, badge scans. Maybe you just had a brief conversation with them. Something not intentional, we'll say. Something that happened kind of out of the air. Well, first of all, organization's going to be your best friend. I mean, if it's a 3-day show, you should be getting back to the hotel room, uploading to the CRM, and starting to lead score and start planning before the show's finished. How do you eat an elephant? You do it a bite at a time. So I know this is not the popular opinion, but if you're out in Vegas, you still work some hours in the PM to make sure that you've been intentional about your investment there. I would say start simply with lead scoring. And we have a tool that lets us to do this in an automated fashion. We're able to plot them against, our or a client's ideal client profile and be able to score them all on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 rather. Your 100s, the higher they are on that spectrum, the more intentional we should get on following up. If you're less than 50, probably don't spend a whole lot of time on it. It's probably not worth going after. But once you have that list and their lead scored, then start setting follow-up. And your follow-up needs to be, as with any outreach it should be very personalized, hyper-personalized. Again, shameless plug, we have a tool that's able to help us do this at scale and in an automated fashion.
Yeah.
But you should be able to do that outreach based on, hey, who's the most important, prioritize and execute on them, and reach out to them within 48 hours of show ending. If you don't have anything booked with them after, reach out within 48 hours, get something on the calendar, and be simple with it. Again, you're not sending them an email with any sort of outreach communication. We say it should be like a professional text message. You're not trying to send them a lengthy, this is our entire product offering, features and benefits included. It should be very quickly, hey, anchor it, why they should talk to you, what similarities you have in common, what value you can bring to them, and why it would be worth them spending their time to book a meeting with you. Because at the end of the day, they don't owe you the meeting. You've got to show value.
Yeah, and I think the important thing too is having systems in place to nurture, because there's some of you that have 12 to 18 month sales cycles. So you're going to have an interaction with somebody and you've got to nurture them. So you definitely, you're investing money in that trade show. And there are lots of times people that come by a booth or have a conversation that they aren't ready at that time. I mean, this stat has been, blown all over the place, but I don't think it's incorrect. It says of the market, only 5% of the people are actually buying at any particular time. The other 95% aren't. So you got to think about a way to stay top of mind with them. Well, having things such as nurtures, connecting with them on LinkedIn is really important because they're going to see your content over time. So really, being purposeful and thinking about those systems. Well, Ben, I know, we've been talking here for quite a while, and I want to start kind of closing things out. You kind of referenced this before, but I kind of referenced this before, but we are now offering what we call a trade show in a box offering, where we use our tools and our methodology to help our clients get ready for trade shows. And we do this by the trade show. And if you'll look in the comments for wherever you're watching this, you should see a PDF that's going to tell you a little bit about that. But we start that with what we call an event assessment call, where we will actually hop on a call with you for 30 minutes, talk through your events, your event strategy, and figure out if it's a good fit for us to work with you on that. So Ben, let's talk a little bit about what all that kind of trade show in a box contains.
Yeah, so it's essentially everything we've talked about, right?
Right.
It is
helping
you.
I would say if you listen to this and you're like, that is a lot of work, I don't have time for that, this is actually for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be investment that you've set aside, whether it's you're doing it on your own or you're paying somebody to do it. Because for a lot of people, especially in the B2B software world that are going out to these health tech conferences or, banking, financial services, or insurance conferences, they spend a lot of money on these trade shows every year, and it comes down to being intentional on it. So what that includes is, hey, we'll have the assessment call. We'll make sure that this is going to be a good fit, that this is a show that you should be at before you're making, this 10, 20, even sometimes we've seen 80 to getting into 6-figure investment on being out here. And then we'll start putting together the plan with you of, hey, how are we going to identify ideal clients at this show? How are we going to get in touch with them? Starting to do that outreach on your behalf. So you're not having to take those 40 hours leading up to it. Or if it's your BDRs or SDRs, they can still work on their pipeline while we'll do it, so that when they get to that trade show, they're ready to go. they got meetings booked and they can do what they do best. So it's including all of that outreach, booking those meetings, scoring those leads. You'll have your lead list of meetings with the lead scoring. You'll have the background on these guys. So when you are going to these meetings, you can go fully informed on that. Post follow-up, it's, those re-engagement campaigns, those nurture drips, making sure everything's up to date and in there the way it should be. It's basically taking your plans on the trade show and everything we've talked about today and actually implementing it in a really white glove approach for you. And if I could I know we're getting short on time here, so I'll just make my quick closing argument on trade shows. I think the mindset has to shift largely. I think for a lot of people, they see trade shows, when you have either advertising or really any marketing activities, you can put them into two categories: demand capture and demand generation. And I think a lot of people think that these trade shows, you're just capturing demand. You're going out there to capture demand. You're, putting together this great booth. Your ideal client's going to be there, although you don't really have a whole lot to back that up. And they're just going to come and they're going to find you because you're better than everybody else. Trade shows are not a demand capture activity. They're a demand generation activity. And you've just already should have the knowledge that, hey, the right people are going to be there. So rather than spending a bunch on ads or something like that to generate demand, you're looking for a demand gen activity within a very prospect ripe environment. And you've got to start generating that demand 2 months before the show in order to make the most of the investment there.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great kind of wrap up. I think one of the things I will mention, though, is if you are interested in talking with us, we'd love to do that. The link to schedule a call with us will be in the comments here, as well as the notes, and we'd love to talk to you about that. And I would say, we deliver this in two different ways. We deliver it in a done for you. We also can deliver it in a workshop. If you've got BDRs and SDRs that will be working on this both ways, can be effective. A lot of our folks, though, the founders, are doing a lot of that work. So we can do that in, like Ben said, a white glove done for you purpose. So in wrapping up, we called this Seriously Don't Wing It at Trade Shows. And hopefully that you gathered that today with what Ben shared with us and what I've shared. And I would say, as you're thinking about trade shows next year, just make sure that you're purposeful and intentful in it. And we wish you the best of success in that. And we'll see you back here soon on the Seriously Don't Do That podcast. I want to thank Ben for joining us. Hopefully he won't be a stranger. We can get him back again. I know he's super busy, but love to have him here. And hopefully you guys will make great comments about him. Just don't make me feel too bad and say you want him to host the podcast. So thank you again for joining. We'll look forward to talking with you in the very near future.
Thanks, guys.
On a booth, walked away with nothing new. Scanned 100 business cards, but no meetings coming through. They focused on the flashy lights, forgot about the plan. Now they're wondering what went wrong, wish they'd understand.